Ever since 1936, it's been a secret. Adopted children not allowed to know who their biological parents are. The information was on their original birth certificate, along with lots of other vital information like their medical history. But adoptees weren't allowed to see that. That was 84 years ago. Fast forward to the present, and at least in New York State, all that has changed. Here's 1010 Wins anchor Bridget Quinn with the details the very day the new adoption law took effect in the Empire State, January 15th, 2020.
Starting today, it'll be easier for people who were adopted to find out about their birth parents. New York will now allow them to get a copy of their birth certificate when they turn 18. Megan Kendenberg is 59 and tells 1010 Win she has always wanted to know more about her biological parents.
You look at your mother and father and you know where you got stuff, and I never knew that. I didn't even know what nationality I was. I had no idea. So for me to walk around and not know, all right, whose hair color do I have? Whose eye color do I have? What medical issues am I going to have?
The law says government agencies can no longer restrict information about their birth parents.
For Megan, her whole world has opened up and there will be no more mystery. But her adopted brother Jeff feels quite differently. He wants no part of going into the past. He says he's quite happy with his adopted parents. They gave him a wonderful, happy life, and he's not interested in and has absolutely no need to learn anything about his biological parents. In his words, let sleeping dogs lie. But now here's the problem. Adoptees are now allowed to learn the names and possible location of their birth parents, and they can simply call the person on the phone or reach out through email and other social media. So what about the biological parent who doesn't want to be found? That birth mother who long ago made peace with the fact that she surrendered her child for adoption. She can't be anonymous anymore. Or perhaps the birth father who closed the chapter on his unwanted child years ago. Perhaps the unwanted pregnancy was the result of an affair, and having that person knock on his door now could turn his life upside down. In 1936, that law sheltering the biological parents was intended to protect their privacy and confidentiality, two precious rights that are no more. There are many unanswered questions. Will the new law have to be amended? Will someone sue to keep their privacy? I'm Carol DiOria.
From 1010 Wins, this is In Depth, bringing people together for a deeper understanding of the major issues facing our area.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to 1010 Wins. This is the law that allows New York State adoptees to have unrestricted access to their original birth certificates. So let me introduce my guests, Jeffrey Quenzer and Megan Kendenberg. Both grew up in Baldwin, New York. They were adopted as siblings, but not biological siblings,
right,
through the Spence Chapin Adoption Agency here in Manhattan. Jeff was born in 1958, Megan in 1960. And also we have attorney Joe Milizio.
Hello.
Hello, managing partner of Vishnik, McGovern, Milizio, a New York and New Jersey law firm. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I want to tell our listeners that I have a personal interest in this subject. It's very near and dear to my heart because I'm an adoptive mother and I have what I think are the two best kids in the whole wide world. Megan thinks otherwise, right?
No, I agree. You definitely do. And then comes us.
So my children are not covered by this new law because they were born out of the country. I adopted my son Joseph from Russia in 1999 when he was 17 months old. And boy, does that change your life dramatically. Anyway, he's now 22, and I adopted my daughter in 2001 from Mumbai, India. She was 15 months old, and the part I can't get over, she weighed 12 and a half pounds at 15 months. That's a little tiny peanut.
Oh, my goodness.
But she is beautiful, she's healthy, and I adopted them both as a single parent. So, now that we got the business out of the way.
That's amazing.
Well, good for you. Congratulations.
It was the best thing I ever did. So, let's begin with Joe Milizio, our attorney for the day. So, explain to me what this law allows.
So this law is a dramatic change, as you indicated, from past practices and procedures, in that it allows any person who was adopted within New York State to obtain a copy of his or her original pre-adoption birth certificate, and perhaps more importantly, the medical information that's contained in the file with that certificate.
Right. But it also allows you to find your birth parents'
identity.
That's correct.
Their full name.
Full name, address, at least at that point in time, medical history that would be contained in the file. It also would include any medications that the biological mother might have been taking at the time of the pregnancy, which is also important. It includes characteristics such as where the family might have originated from, characteristics of the parents, things of that nature.
The medical information that you're allowed to have, probably most people wouldn't argue with.
Right.
Because as you grow up, you need to know what your medical history is. Every time you go to a doctor, they ask you for your medical history.
Especially that of your parents, etc.
Exactly.
Right.
But the part of the identity, I think that's where many people get stuck.
Right.
Okay? Because there are privacy issues. I mean, this is a law that dates back to 1936, when there was shame associated with a woman getting pregnant out of wedlock, or if it was a baby from an extramarital affair, and things just were not accepted back in 1936. That's now so many people just take for granted. It's like, what's the big deal? But it was a very big deal back then, and for some people, it is still a big deal.
Right.
And I have a personal story also that I could share. About 20 years ago, I got a call from someone who said, I might be your sister. And it turns out that she is my father's half-sister. My father has the same name that I do, so she thought I was my father. But at that point, when she was born, she was put up for adoption, and nobody in my family, my father's deceased now, but nobody in my family knew that my grandmother was pregnant.
Wow. I love that story. That's really nice.
It's a great story. We're excited about it. But I can see where somebody,
Right.
especially when, now this is already a few generations,
Right.
but when it's somebody where it's the direct parent right now, where that could really be a problem. Is there anything in the law that would protect somebody's privacy if they really don't want the name out there?
There doesn't seem to be. The real push behind the change in the law was so that people could, in fact, obtain information about their history, their family history, and their family's medical history, with the understanding or with the presumption that anybody else has the right to that information, so why shouldn't
we?
a person who has been adopted? But on the other side of that coin, I could see that there could be issues by people who have, in fact, utilized the adoption system, in that they were told without any hesitancy that their information would in fact be protected and kept confidential. And now at this point that is no longer the case. So especially with people that are still alive, obviously,
Right.
and who might be still in a situation where they feel shame of some nature.
Or it was just a closed chapter. Let's
Yes.
talk to
There may be
Megan and
some
Jeff.
issues on the other side of that as well, though. So for somebody like my brother who doesn't want to know, is this available to the person that gave you up for adoption? Is there an ability for them to find out, hey, what happened to my child that I gave up for adoption 60 years ago?
And that doesn't seem to be the case.
Right,
It's
okay.
only people that were adopted.
Right.
So
So
it's
we
not
have the
in the
right, but
reverse.
it's not
It's
reciprocal.
not in the reverse. Right.
Okay. So, Megan, why don't we talk to you for a minute? You wanted to find your birth
I
parents.
did. Yeah, it's very exciting. Through Ancestry.com, I've found my father. He's deceased, but he had 5 children and 6. Now I just found out about another one, so that's pretty exciting. Haven't reached out to her yet, but it's been really nice. The 3 that are alive that grew up with my father are very receptive to me. We talk all the time, and it's really a nice thing. I'm really enjoying it, you know. If nothing else, I've made new friends, you know.
And what about your birth mom?
When I get my birth certificate, I'm hoping that I'll find out something about her. If I don't, you know, if she's not alive or if she had other children, I'm pretty sure she had one before me, because that's what Spence Chapin put in a letter with non-identifying information, that she had had a son before me and her sisters were raising him. And unfortunately, she ended up as an indigent woman and ended up having a baby at New York Infirmary. And that's how life went for her. So it would be interesting to see where she landed after that.
Right. Now, you applied online?
I did. Yes.
Okay. In fact...
But actually, no, I'm sorry. I went to apply online, and that option wasn't available yet. And stupidly, I thought maybe the next day it would be, and I just spent $40 to get my own birth certificate. But no, you had to do a paper application. New York City is not... if you were adopted in the counties outside of outside of Manhattan, you are able to do it online. But for New York City, you cannot. Not yet.
Right. You have to go through the Bureau of Vital Statistics, I believe.
Right.
That's correct.
Vital check.
And it can be vital check, right? And it can be either a paper application, and I believe they're thinking about instituting a personal appearance to file the application.
Right. I think they will, but you won't be able to get it right then
Right.
and there. Yeah.
New York State also has a walk-in where you can file an application upstate New York or do it online. Or
when you research
paper.
on the internet, it tells you that all those options are available. But I think because the law has just passed, a lot of the
system
details,
still isn't working.
right,
gonna
are
be
not caught up to
barraged
speed.
with-
But we should point out that the law took effect January 15th.
Yes.
And they say within a few hours they had 1,700 applicants.
I
Yes.
can just imagine.
So people were really, really hungry for this. And I know in the case of my kids, as I said, this wouldn't apply to them, but my son is very hungry for information. And my daughter is like, no, I'm good. I'm okay.
See, we have
Which
the
brings
opposite
us to
effect.
Jeff. So you're not interested in finding anyone.
No, not really. What I think is important to mention is I think the medical issue as well as your natural parents are two separate issues altogether. Because I certainly, and as we find out more and more how hereditary issues relate to medical, it's imperative, I think, that both the adoptive parents and the individual know the history. There are so many things, I'm familiar with aneurysms and heart issues and things like that that both the parents and the child should know, certain diseases that can be passed on to children, etc. That I believe you should know right from the get-go. But from the point of who your natural parents are, I prefer not to go down that. And simply, it's because I don't know what I'll find out. And it could be very upsetting. I could find certain things out that I kind of crossed that bridge and I passed it, that all of a sudden I'm not too happy with, or like I say, things that could be very upsetting. So I've chosen that it's best to leave. I'm happy where I am. I've crossed over the bridge of understanding adoption, etc. Move on.
Right.
And at the same time, though, I also, if they're going to make these records available, it should be 18 or 21, because I don't think an adolescent like struggling through high school or something like that. Think how these kids play divorced parents against each other. All of a sudden you involve a natural parents versus the adoptive. It could get really ugly. So if these records become available, the person or the adoptive person should be at least emotionally mature enough to be able to handle it correctly.
And the way the law is written, as long as you're 18 years old, you're entitled to that.
That's correct.
It is 18 years
And you're right, 18 is not
Still
that
very
old.
young.
It's very
I
young.
think
You're
so.
still growing.
Hey.
And like I say, there could be real problems if somebody is not ready for that.
And there are a lot of people at the age of 18. Me, one of them, when I was 18 years old, I certainly, if there was so many questions out there, I'm not sure that I would have been mentally able to handle that at that point. Certain things you're very mature about, but
It's hard enough
there are
to,
a lot of things.
you don't struggle, but that question of why is always in the back of your head. And as you get older, you understand. But if you take somebody, that's not kind of emotionally prepared, or take somebody that's 18 or 19, just graduated, didn't get along, all of a sudden they find out who their natural mom and dad are, and they're like, wow, they're wealthy. There are so many different concepts or issues that you could say, make sure they're emotionally strong enough to understand both their side as well as chasing down their natural parents.
One of the things that I think is a real issue for people who are adopted is, you mentioned the question, why? Why was I given up? Terms that they really don't even use anymore, given up. There's a rejection there that a lot of children who are adopted deal with. Like, didn't they love me? What did I do wrong? And so if they go searching for a birth parent, suppose they get rejected all over again.
That can
and
definitely
like you say,
happen.
you might have.
As we discussed, yes, it could be, once again, you reach out and you get pushed back on. It can be upsetting. Or what if I found out something about my mother that I didn't really need to know, type of thing, and now I'm also upset that I found out, that can weigh heavily on my mind. So once you've crossed that bridge, sometimes I feel it's like, let sleeping dogs lay, type of feeling.
Had I not gone to seminars on it at Spence Chapin, where I came from, I think I probably would have had a lot more different thoughts. But after hearing other people that had been rejected or found them, and here you have your adoptive parents raising you, and then all of a sudden here's these strangers coming in and thinking that they have the right to tell you how to live your life again. That can be complicated. But listening to all that, you kind of think about it, take a stand on where are you going to be with this whole thing. I'm either going to walk away if I'm rejected and say, okay, that's the reason why I am where I am, and I had a happy life, and I'm going to leave it that way. So.
But see, you're a mature adult.
That's what I'm saying. I think if I had not sat through those seminars at the age that I did, I wouldn't have thought that way, I don't think.
Another piece of this is that if the adopted person should pass away, this law allows the descendants to apply for the birth certificate. Because if you want to know, did my mother have something aside from whatever she died from, some other
a genetic
problem,
disposition to something,
the descendants need to know.
Can they be signed power of attorney for something like that?
I'm sorry?
Can they be given power of attorney for something like that during an estate type of issue?
Well, they have the ability right now on their own accord as a lineal descendant to obtain the information.
Just apply for the birth certificate as a descendant.
Yes. So it can be children, grandchildren.
Oh, okay. So
does the person, the originally adopted person, have to be deceased? Or can you, suppose you have a woman who says, I don't want to know who my birth mother was, but her children want to know.
Right. That's what I was kind of asking. Like, is there a way to power of attorney within your own will?
I don't believe it's necessary for the original adopted person to be deceased. That's a very good question.
Huh.
I do not believe that it's necessary.
And I wonder...
Something to research.
Oh, we're getting the paperwork that maybe will tell us for sure. And while you look that up, I'm wondering if problems will start to crop up with the adoption law, that maybe they have to refine it.
100% so.
Oh, yeah, I think there's going to be amendments to it for sure.
Once the dust settles.
Legal issues. Well, seems like it's the legal issues and somebody suing somebody where they finally draw attention to that. But you can pretty much figure somebody that didn't. I consider it this way. What if a mother or a pregnant mother choosing whether to have the child or not is told specifically, well, the child is going to have the right to know who you are. And the mother determining whether she wants to have the child or have it terminated says, well, I don't want them to find my family, my husband. And they turn around and say simply, no, I'd rather terminate the pregnancy than be able to be found by this child that I was going to give up for adoption. Basically, what you've done now is the child has been terminated, and that's horrible. So something like that, because I was just thinking, what if a mother chose I didn't want to do that? So,
but I was pushed into it because my privacy was going to be violated. I don't want that to come back into my life, my family, and all of a sudden they start choosing that.
The law has tentacles.
Yes.
A lot.
And to take a step back, I'm looking at the regulations now, and it does provide that the adopted person's direct lineal descendant can only apply if the adopted person is deceased.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Makes sense.
So that does make sense.
But many years could ensue between the time they can find out if it's something that they feel they really need to know.
Yes.
And something I wanted to mention too, I know it's kind of hearsay, but Roe versus Wade's going to come up again. And all of a sudden, a lot of issues where certain children or certain pregnancies that may have been terminated are now going to be where the parents or the mother cannot afford, etc. They start giving up more and more children to adoption. And this could play into that effect as well. I mean, assuming that happens, but I do see, in my personal opinion, a lot more adoptions be coming out there, And
I see it the opposite way, at least in today's environment, in that if somebody is pregnant and wants or feels at this point in time during the pregnancy that they would like to remain anonymous, it might prohibit them or dissuade them from taking advantage of the adoption system.
Yes, that's right.
I wonder if they can, write the law, if they go to reform it, in such a way that says you are entitled to this information. You cannot act on it unless both parties agree.
I agree
Well,
with that
then,
100%.
see, that goes
yes.
back to why did we make this law in the first place? Because this is the information that all adoptees have been looking for, that want to know, is I want to know, where did I come from?
But you could be given the name. I mean, I'm just throwing this out as a hypothetical. My mother was, Mary Jane Smith, but I'm not allowed to contact her. In other words, an intermediary would have to contact her
To see
and
if she would
say,
allow that.
do you want to be contacted? If she says no,
Right.
I mean, that might be a way of
Well,
preserving
confidentiality.
her confidentiality so that her life is not disturbed.
It would still make her information, her personal information, known. It would just prevent further contact.
Upsetting somebody's life who says
Yes.
everything is fine right now, like you said before, let sleeping dogs lie.
Well, at that point, then you may have this child who, again, or somebody that's a little bit emotionally not mature enough to realize that they've been turned down, and they keep coming back, because that can happen.
Right.
So it's got to be a tight and controlled law to protect pretty much both parties, is my opinion.
It just seems also that with technology, the advances, Megan, you said you used Ancestry.com, some of these issues are almost moot because you don't need the birth certificate necessarily to find the person.
If everybody is willing. Now, here's another thing with the registries. Somebody my age is going to be, if I'm looking, what are the chances that an 80-year-old has gone into the system and signed up? They don't know, that they're not IT compatible. So you have less of a chance, and maybe they're out there and they want to know, hey, what happened to you your whole life? I hope that I did the right thing and that you had a good life.
And so many adoptees have great lives after they're adopted.
Exactly. I mean, we had great parents. They would have done anything for us, and they did. So.
But there is sort of a third-party story to this whole scenario also, and you would be that third party. What would your feeling be if your children said to you, gee, I want to look into this and find out?
I personally would be great with that because I think it would give my kids a certain measure of peace, especially one of them.
A sense of self.
A sense of self. And I'm really, personally, really into family, and I believe it's part of the fabric of who you are, where you came from, who the people are in your background. And I'm a person who likes to have a lot of family around me, so I'm okay with that. But I could see where somebody who is perhaps less secure,
a little threatened, right?
Feel a little threatened. Kids do funny things. You were saying, Jeff, before about playing against each other.
There's something simple. Well, not so, but how they're divorced, play one against the other to get something.
Right. My daughter did that.
It goes a lot deeper. What if your natural mother, you start spending some time and she's kind of a little bit more open in certain things about things, and then you go back to your natural parents and go, well, she let me do this and she let me do this, I'm going there. It destroys them because they're scared at the stop. And on the other side, you have the mother may turn around, wait, it's cool we hang out, but I don't want you here. That's why I gave it.
Well, it's like what I was saying before, the tentacles that this has. They're dealing with so many issues just growing up that have nothing to do with. Right.
You don't have to start dealing with something like, who are my real parents and why?
And your mother lets you do whatever you want, and how come mine doesn't, and all those things, and it doesn't matter. it doesn't matter who raised you.
You're
going to do that as a child no matter what.
I think each person or adopted person that chooses the path to go chase should just weigh it carefully, because, again, I say you can find positive sides, but you also may find some things that you just are not very unhappy, or you're unhappy with and do not please you, and all of a sudden you've opened up wounds that you thought you've long past gotten over.
I think part of finding everything out when you're 18 would be to go through some counseling to understand this is what can happen. There can be a lot of beautiful positive things to it, and there can be some negative things to it, but you need to understand that and be prepared to be, what you find out is what you find out, and you have to be accepting of that. You have to understand somebody else's point of view on it and be okay with that.
You know, it's interesting. When I first went to adopt my children, I was required to do the home study. And you're asked all these questions. Why do you want to adopt? How is this going to fit into your lifestyle? And, you know, maybe it should be that kind of thing where you are grilled a little bit. Maybe you're required to have a home study before you find out your birth parents' information. So just to make sure that you're mature enough to handle it. I don't really think that would ever happen, but I'm thinking...
Right, that it could be a benefit.
Right, I think just to even go sit in on something like what I did, I think it was very beneficial for me to see that, wow, you know, it could turn out completely different than what I'm dreaming about, you know.
We have fantasies about what our parents are, what they could have been.
Yep.
And there's a long way to reality from there.
Exactly.
See, I haven't even... I keep that so far from, I don't even think about that, to be quite honest with you. It's just, I have my parents, or, you know, my mother's deceased, but I had my dad, I had my mother, they did a great job. I'm happy where I am.
question it. No, I'm only kidding.
Well, like paid for school, they did lots of things.
I don't know about you,
they
but
got me to all my ball games.
Right.
True. It's like, but it's like I say, I don't want to know, because I don't want to go into the abyss.
Right. It's like going off the cliff, and is there a net underneath there or not?
And I'm okay with either way. However it falls, it falls.
Right.
I'm okay.
And that's what makes the world go round. I think we've covered just about everything. Well, I hope everyone has enjoyed listening to the podcast. And I don't think we've heard the last of this issue.
First lawsuit, major lawsuit, yes. It seems to what it moves people.
Thank you all for listening. This is 1010 Wins.
I'm Carol DiOria.
To subscribe to In Depth, go to 1010wins.com and click on the podcast tab.